Hello, Fairfax County Public Schools. This is Dr. Brabrand, your superintendent. Thank you for tuning in to another Return to School Countdown. Today's town hall is going to be focused around special education and our special education students, our faculty, and all the supports that we're putting in place to make it a successful virtual start for our special education kids. We're delighted to have you this evening. I have several special guests that I want to introduce you to in a moment. But I want to say up front, we are committed to doing everything we can to serve every child by name and by need here in Fairfax County Public Schools. We recognize the challenges of a virtual start. This is the right approach as we begin the year. We are committed to bringing back small cohorts of kids during the first quarter of the year and prioritizing our special needs kids, including those in special education. I'll be providing additional updates to the school board and to the community about that on September 15th at our next work session, and I hope you'll tune in. But we're excited tonight to answer many questions for you as our teachers and staff are working so hard this week and last week and next week as we prepare for our virtual opening on September 8th. I've got a wonderful team here tonight to introduce to you. First, I want to introduce to you our acting assistant superintendent for special services, Mike Bloom. Mike, we're delighted to have you with us tonight. We also have Ed Winhausen. Ed, glad to have you here. You're one of our amazing teachers that we're going to learn more about you in just a few minutes, as well as Michaela Antonio. Michaela, glad to have you here. So we're thrilled to have a great team tonight to help answer your questions. And we're going to start actually with Mike Bloom. Again, Mike, you're our acting assistant superintendent for special services. I know you've served education for over 30 years, focused on special education students and their families. You have an undergraduate degree from the State University of New York at Geneseo, and you began your career in Rochester, New York.
I did.
That's wonderful. And you came and joined the Fairfax family in 2001. And you've really simply risen through the ranks here in Fairfax County, first as an inclusive schools resource teacher, an educational specialist, a coordinator of special education instruction, director of special education instruction, and currently as the interim assistant superintendent. I know you've been busy, and all of our teams have been busy, but a couple questions just right out of the gate that I think folks watching tonight want to ask. Many of our parents are wondering, how is their child going to receive related services such as speech and language, OT, PT, counseling? How are these services going to be part of the school, of the students' instructional day in this virtual environment?
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Brabrand. I wanted to start first by thanking our parent community for the partnership that we have had with you, not only this year, but the many years that your children have been attending our schools. We know that the virtual environment has had a lot of stress on our families at times, asking questions about how we're going to make this successful. And we know that many children have also experienced many joys through the virtual environment. So we know that there's a great continuum, and certainly there are a lot of needs that you as parents in our community are asking us as a school division to be able to address. So I want to start by talking a little bit about related services. I know this has been an area of concern in the spring when we were delivering distance learning. And the main point that I wanted to put forth is that all of our related services will take place on a continuum of support. So we have some related services that will be provided within a general education setting. Others might receive their related services as part of a pull-out small group setting, and some can be delivered individually. But the main point is that there is flexibility in how those related services are delivered, and they're delivered in accordance with students' IEPs. The goals and the different services that students will need are identified as part of their IEP, and we'll be working hard to make sure that we deliver those. Some students also may receive counseling as a related service, and our school psychologists, our school social workers will also be working directly with case managers and with students to be able to deliver those services, again, in either a small group or an individual setting as appropriate. So the main thing is we want to be flexible in how we provide those services. You might find in your child's schedule during the day that related services might be provided during asynchronous time. It might be provided during instruction within the classroom, or it could also be provided flexibly on that Monday intervention time. But again, you as parents will be talking with case managers, looking at your child's schedule, and then determining the best time and the most appropriate time for them to receive their related services.
You know, thanks, Mike. That's one of the things you just said at the end. So the case manager is really a key communicator to parents, and I know that our case managers are working very hard to reach out to parents. We have a lot of IEPs to do and a lot of work on that, and the case manager really is that key contact. If parents haven't heard yet from a case manager and have concerns, what should they do, or when should they expect the timeline for having their case manager reach out to them around these kinds of questions?
Sure. So all of our teachers are back on contract now, and they have been making connections with parents. So many of you at home may have already received a communication from your child's case manager. If you have not, you should expect that to be happening before the start of school. So if you haven't received that communication yet, I would just reach out to your school administrator and ask that question if you could be in contact with your child's case manager. There are some things that you'll need to talk with that case manager about in preparation for the school year. One of those areas will involve looking at whether or not the IEP needs to be amended from the spring, and so that'll be an important conversation you'll want to make sure you have before your child comes back to school.
Mike, one other question before we continue on with some additional questions and share some questions with other guests. You mentioned the spring. One of the things in the spring was the availability of something we call the TLP, or the Temporary Learning Plan. Are we having the TLPs this fall? If so or if not, can you provide information to parents about what we are having and how that's different than what we did in the spring around TLPs?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. So yes, in the spring, we had a temporary learning plan, which was a one-page document that sort of outlined what the continuity of learning would look like for a student with a disability. So there were select goals and accommodations that were added as part of that plan. But we are discontinuing the TLPs as we move into the reopening of schools. So parents can expect that some IEPs may need to be amended, and case managers, again, will be reaching out to parents. Case managers will be looking specifically at whether or not the identified goals and accommodations and services in their current IEP will be able to be delivered in a virtual environment. For many students, the answer is yes, and there won't be a need for an addendum or to amend the IEP. But for other students, there may be a need to convene that IEP team in order to take a closer look at what accommodations or services could be provided within that virtual environment. But those meetings are happening now. Those case managers are reaching out to parents now. Sometimes we can have an IEP meeting, an addendum without a meeting, so you wouldn't have to actually convene the IEP team, and you can do that without a meeting. But those meetings are happening now.
That's wonderful, Mike. It's so great to know not every IEP needs to be changed, and then some can be changed without having to have that formal meeting. Because I know one of the things a lot of our parents are thinking about, how can we be sure my student is ready to learn on day one, and that we can do everything we can to support that IEP that child has. So thank you for everything your team is doing. Let's take a couple of calls and see what's on callers' minds as we start our community town hall around special education. Caller, welcome to our community town hall.
Hi, Dr. Brabrand. I have a question regarding the attendance policy that was put out just recently, specifically about tardies and unexcused absences based on the announcement that the FCPS recently released in the most recent email. And in reading it, it didn't seem to be much flexibility to accommodate built into the system for our kids' challenges with ADHD or other executive function challenges. How is FCPS prepared to accommodate our kids with these challenges, distractions, et cetera, with where time is more difficult for the kids, particularly where some schools they have a personality of their own typically. Some are more flexible, some are not. So how is that going to be accommodated?
Sure. Thank you, caller. That's a great question. First of all, I want to be very clear to our folks tonight. We are taking a new and more flexible approach to attendance this year as we start the year virtually, and this is something that has been communicated to school districts across the Commonwealth as we face the pandemic. We have to look at attendance differently and find multiple pathways to show that kids are participating in their learning. We really need to make the focus go to engagement and not just attendance. In terms of special education and concerns about attendance, Mr. Bloom, are there things that we can share with parents that may be helpful, or messages that we can help reinforce at schools about flexibility around how we can capture attendance for our special education kids?
Sure. Well, case managers are going to be working hard with parents and students at looking at the individual schedule for each child. And there's time built into those schedules for both synchronous and asynchronous learning. And we do have a number of teachers who, in that large group setting, will be recording their lessons for students to either access at a later time during the day, or if they're unavailable at a time that their class is taking place, they'll again be able to take a look and access that recorded training a little bit later on. Case managers will also be scheduling time, individual time with students, to review those lessons, maybe do some level of reteaching. For those students, as you mentioned, who have executive functions deficits, those are some areas that we're going to help as the case manager works with a child to be able to organize their materials, organize their schedule for the day, and organize for success. So again, the key is, what individual supports are those case managers going to be working closely with parents and students to provide in order to help them to be successful?
And you know, Mike, one of the things you've said, we are required to take attendance, but we are going to create multiple pathways and really flexibility. You talked about the recorded lessons. So if your child misses part or all of a session, they can go back and watch it, that re-recording. There can be ways where, and flexibility for kids to step out who need to step out, who need to take that screen break, and we're not going to be counting those minutes against them. It really is working, especially for our special education kids, the case manager, then sharing with those teachers the unique needs so that our teachers know the IEP, know the flexibility and accommodation that kids need. We're not going to be marking kids down academically because of them not being at the class right on time, or having to excuse themselves for a few minutes, or even having to miss a class or two. There are other ways to watch the re-recording, to do some asynchronous work separately that can count as attendance, and we're going to do our very best to make sure that we're counting all of our special education kids. So thanks for your hard work on that. Let's take another phone call. Caller, welcome to the Return to School Community Town Hall around special education.
Good evening, Dr. Brager, and thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I'm one of 4 enhanced autism teachers at my school, and in order for our students to attend school virtually, they have to be able to log in successfully with their ID and password. They have to locate and select the Google Chrome icon. They have to enter into their FCPS Google portal and then navigate to their class page, in addition to other future steps. Our autism classes have students that cannot identify numbers, letters, or even follow multi-step directions. In addition, their parents are unfortunately unable to sit with and help them during school. If you are saying that attendance is mandatory, what can the technology department do to simplify the multi-step process for students with severe disabilities and make sure they're able to engage?
Thank you for that question, and I'm going to ask Mike Bloom to share your perspective on that. We obviously want to do everything we can to get kids set up for technology. Are there some things that we can do and some strategies we can share around that caller's question?
Sure. So thank you so much for your question. We do know that there are certain populations of students that may have a more difficult time accessing the technology, and so there are some supports that can be provided. We certainly have our applied behavior analysis, our ABA coaches that can work with teachers to be able to identify, again, student by student, need by need, what areas of technology they may be having a more difficult time accessing. For those parents who are able to be at home and to be able to assist their child, we can also provide coaching sessions. I know you as teachers provide coaching sessions to your families as well, and the assistance of our ABA coaches can also help to provide some level of support to our families. The technology, part of the startup of the school year will involve an orientation for all students, and part of that orientation is really meant to be able to identify what aspects of the technology kids may be having a more difficult time with. and then problem solving or working again together with families and with teachers to see if there are some creative solutions that can be able to be that will be able to be accessed in order to help them to access virtually. There's probably not going to be a perfect answer for every student, but to the extent that we need to involve our resources, like our ATS resource teachers, our ABA coaches, we'll want to make sure that we utilize as many resources as we can.
You know, Mike, one of the things that I know has come up too, we tend to think about the virtual learning as getting on the formal laptop computer. Are there other things? You mentioned ATS, our assistive technology services. Are there other devices or other approaches for some of our very special needs kids that may be more successful than just a typical keyboard? And can you speak a little bit about that, about what we have?
Sure. So some of our students are accessing through iPads. Some are using touchscreen technology. Other students, they might be accessing an asynchronous recorded activity that the teacher has posted so that, again, later in the day, as they have a parent who is able to assist them to access some of that instruction, that's the time that they can access that. We've built into our schedules time for breaks, time for some of those asynchronous activities. And again, if there's a caregiver at home, if there's a parent who's able to assist, that might be a time where the teacher has posted some sort of activity for that to happen, so it's not happening during that synchronous time.
I think it's a great point, too, to talk about all that flexibility and to reiterate, as I shared at the beginning of the program, we know the need to have our most vulnerable kids have the opportunity to be in-person small cohorts. I've shared a phased-in approach, and I'll be providing an update on September 15th. And I am very hopeful about getting some of our most vulnerable students in school, in person, in the weeks ahead during this fall. So thanks for everything you're doing, Mike, to get them, all of our students off to a great start virtually. We're going to take one more call, and then we'll introduce you to some additional guests. So caller, welcome to the Community Town Hall around special education.
Hi, Dr. Braybrand.
Hi.
My question is actually about those cohorts, so thank you for the lead-in.
You're welcome.
As I've been looking at the documentation for the cohorts, they make no mention of students who may be in a gen ed classroom but receive significant, maybe even 100% special education supports within that classroom. What is FCPS doing? Are those children going to be included in those cohorts at all? How is FCPS addressing this?
Mike, I know actually we're beginning, we again preliminarily shared with the board particular groups, and we ordered them group 1, group 2, group 3, about a phased-in approach. The specific instance that the caller is talking about, have we looked at that yet, or can you talk a little bit about what those considerations would be as we're looking at our phase-in for that kind of situation that the caller described?
Sure. So thank you for that question. So as we've looked at that phase-in model, some of the decision-making around the cohorts of students that would come in first really centered around not wanting to mix students. So a cohort model is designed so that when students come in person, that they could stay in that classroom, in that self-contained classroom, and if teachers needed to float in and out of those rooms, that could happen, but the teacher, or the students primarily, would stay within those classrooms. So our first group, our preschoolers, our students in our preschool autism classrooms and our early childhood class-based classrooms, we know that we can have them as a cohort in a single classroom. For many students who access the general education environment, that's where, at least at the elementary level, a lot of those students need to go from one classroom to another to access the general education setting and then come back and access the special education setting. For our secondary students, again, because of the many courses that they're taking, they would need to rotate and flow in and out of different classrooms. So that would result in the mixing of students. So we were very mindful about the approach and our phase-in plan, but that's some of the thinking around those groups. The second group would be those students, again, who are accessing the adapted curriculum. These are more of our students that are in self-contained classrooms. And again, when they're in the school building, we could keep them together as a cohorted group. But again, for our general education students, because they may be accessing time in the inclusive environment, that makes that a little bit more difficult.
Mike, right now in the virtual environment for that special education kid getting special education support, but really going in the general education classrooms, how is that working virtually? How are we providing special education support as they go in these general ed classrooms in a virtual sense? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So many of our teachers are engaged in a co-teaching or team teaching partnership with a general education teacher. So you may find for your child that there are two teachers in that virtual environment. There's a special educator and a general education teacher. Many classrooms also have paraprofessionals that will be joining the instruction. So a lot of the supports and services that we could provide in person will be delivered within that virtual environment. Now, I know that every teacher has an opportunity to meet individually with students, to talk about their specialized instruction, to look at the IEP goals. That will be time where that special educator can conference or meet individually with a student and talk about that general education environment. They can check for understanding. They can do some level of reteaching. A paraprofessional can be engaged in community building, checking for any goals related to peer relationships or social skills development. So there are a lot of ways that our special educators and our paras will be joining those general ed settings to make sure that we're targeting those specialized IEP goals that students have and then providing the level of supports that those kids will need.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you for answering all those questions. We may come back in a few minutes, but I want to go ahead and share some of our other special guests who are here who represent all the wonderful things we're doing with special education. We're going to start with Ed Winhausen. And Ed, we've already introduced you, but you've been involved with early childhood education 26 years. You came to us in 2013 through the Head Start program at Westgate. And you currently are a preschool special education teacher at Rose Hill Elementary. So I have a couple of big questions I just want to ask you out of the gate. Many of our youngest learners, and again, you're working with preschool, are some of the most difficult to keep engaged in a virtual environment. As a teacher of early childhood special education preschoolers, how are you able, and how are your colleagues able, when thinking about the return to school virtually, to motivate, engage, and capture the attention of your students and your colleague students through distance learning? Tell us the secrets.
Secrets? Oh, goodness. Well, I wasn't sure I was supposed to reveal secrets, but I can speak to that.
You can reveal anything in this town hall discussion.
I can speak to your questions. Really, we try to make the learning as fun as possible. You know, children's work is play. Young children are learning through their curiosity, through their experiences, through their experimentation. So we're trying to provide opportunities in the virtual environment to do just that, to give them an opportunity to learn, to grow, to experience the world around them. We try to make it as fun as possible, and if we're having fun, then we hope that they'll have fun as well. We can speak through a screen. There was a famous teacher who did that his whole career. Mr. Rogers did that, and he taught virtually his whole career, and he was probably one of the best teachers that ever lived.
You know, I never thought of Mr. Rogers was really our first virtual teacher, and he certainly was a great teacher for me, too. Let me ask, though, for preschool, a lot of our parents are concerned about screen time. Does every activity that you're doing in the preschool environment have to be screen focused? Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you can do to successfully engage a preschool kid that may not be staring at the screen hour after hour.
Screen time is a big deal for most families, and we're sensitive to that. One of the things that we try to do is incorporate different activities within our learning blocks. During our synchronous learning sessions, we're reading a storybook where there's an interactivity component to it. We may ask the children to find an object in their home and bring it back to the screen. There's movement involved in that. We may sing songs where that involves movement as well, where we're doing finger plays or we're using puppets to engage them. We even did yoga last spring. You know, once a week we would get out our mats and we would engage in yoga poses. So it's not just static learning. It's not just sitting at a desk and drilling. That's really not how we teach in preschool. There's a lot of action and a lot of movement going on.
I love it. I love it. I love it, Ed. And, you know, I can't wait to visit your classroom September 8th. One of the other things that is a big question is, how are you all engaging families? We know what you're doing to engage kids. It's such an important role that parents have, particularly in preschool, to make sure their kids and feel like that their kids are getting off to the right start, particularly with the pandemic, right? We're all facing where our kids are. I'm a parent too. and where our kids are in their moment in life. And we want it to still be the very best it can be, even with the pandemic and some of the challenges that it has. What are some things you all are doing and that you were doing to engage parents and families this year in that partnership?
A great question, and thank you for that. One of the things that we've tried to do is involve our families, not just parents, but other family members. There could be a caregiver that's taking care of a child during the day. It could be an older sibling, a cousin, a grandfather. We try to get everybody involved as much as possible. And through that process, we have them sitting as a shoulder partner with our student, allowing them to engage and learn strategies and tactics that we're engaged with their child. You know, there's a lot of prompting and reinforcing that goes on in special ed, and we can't do that through a screen without mainly just verbal praise. But a parent who is right there could give a hug. A parent who is right there could give a high five. A parent who's right there could give a raisin or an M&M. So we really want to make sure that we have engagement from our families. We're also scheduling one-on-one coaching times with our families. So we'll have once a week a set-aside time where we have a synchronous time where we go together one-on-one with the parent and the child together, where we can offer them incentives and understanding of how to engage their child in a more meaningful way. But we also want to make sure that we're recognizing the value that the parent has in this relationship. We do nothing in isolation, and parents are experts in their children. So we need to rely on their expertise to motivate our students.
Ed, one last thing I want to ask before we take a few calls. What do you think it's going to take to be successful this year through the eyes of a preschool special education teacher? What are you looking most forward to, and what do you think we most need to be thinking about? What do parents most need to be thinking about in making sure we can have a successful fall, a beginning of the school year in this virtual environment?
I kind of just spoke to that when I talked about the parent relationship and how we're working as a team together. There's a reason that a parent is part of an IEP team. As I said, they're the expert in their child. Without their input, especially in the preschool level, because we can't expect a 3-year-old to log in. They need some assistance and guidance to do that. So we're relying on their input and their participation. We really want them to feel empowered. We want them to trust us as a teacher, as a partner. And once we have that trust, we can really do the best work for their child and really give them the best, most positive school experience possible.
Well, listen, Ed, I really appreciate those answers. And one of the things that has most resonated to me tonight, and just thinking about my own life, is hearing the idea that Mr. Rogers was really our nation's first virtual teacher in a way, aimed at young children, aimed at special needs, and how do we take many of the wonderful things we saw in what he did and use that legacy in our day-to-day activities here in Fairfax County for preschool kids. So thanks for all you're doing. I think I'm going to take a phone call or two, and let's go to the caller. Welcome to the Fairfax County Public Schools Community Town Hall.
Good evening, Dr. Brabrand.
Good evening.
You said several times that for safety, you'll be phasing in small cohorts of small numbers of students, emphasis on small numbers. However, 38 schools, including the one my daughter attends as a special education student, will already have dozens and dozens of students in the facility as part of Fairfax County's Supporting Return to School program. It would obviously be unsafe, by your own standards, to mix a bunch of cohorts in the same school together, just pile everyone in there. It would defeat the whole purpose of these safety measures you set up. So I have two options. Option one is you don't let my daughter and her fellow special education students return to in person, so the SRS students can stay. The other option is you kick out the SRS students to allow the special education students to come in. So I'm wondering which one you're planning on.
Well, thank you, caller, for that question. SRS is part of what the county is doing to help support return to school and provide supports for parents who need to get back to work. We have traditionally had in the school year our SAC program, and SRS is a needed program to help many of our families who need that support as they work to return to work. These are very small cohorts, no more than 10 kids per class, and we are beginning at some schools to bring them in. As we bring them in, we are sharing, as I said, on September 15th, a phase-in plan to bring in kids to do FCPS educational instructional services, and we are bringing a phase plan to do it. So really, SRS is the first of the small cohorted groups that are coming into Fairfax County Public Schools. We're glad to partner with the county to make that happen. We know many families have the need to be able to go back to work, and frankly, that is one of the many competing concerns we have as we balance the safety and health of our students and staff, along with the educational needs of our kids. SRS is the first small cohort, but certainly not the last, and I'll be providing an update with timelines at the September 15th school board meeting. So thanks for that question. Let's take another call. Caller, welcome to the Community Town Hall. Caller, welcome.
About the cohort this
Let's go to the next caller, please. Let's see. I think we're having a little technical difficulty. Let me go ahead and take an email, and then I want to introduce my last and very special guest. One of the questions that we've received is you've talked about bringing back the neediest to school first, special ed, ESOL, K2. What about seniors? Could they be brought back because there are some things in school that they would like to do for their last year of school? I need to be very candid with you that this is certainly something that we are looking at. Lots of groups of kids with special needs, kids, again, as we've already talked about, kids entering middle school, and seniors is certainly a very special group. And I know because I'm a parent of 2 seniors, and I know how much they want to return to school. I'm working with our school board student rep, Nathan Unabudo, around a message to our class of 2021 and really talk about what are some opportunities that we can do to make the senior year special. We're also looking at Mondays as one of the first places where we can still have a virtual master schedule at our middle and high school, but provide some opportunities for our students and our seniors to be back. One of the first opportunities for our seniors to return to school is actually our SAT testing day in September, where we're offering all seniors the opportunity free of charge to take the SAT. We know that's something many of our seniors didn't get the opportunity to do during their junior year in the spring because of COVID closure, and we hope many of them will come out and take that SAT as they get ready for college. That's on September 23rd. It will be free for every student, and it will be offered for every high school senior student, and it will be offered at every high school in Fairfax County Public Schools. I want to introduce you to one of my other special guests, my last special guest, Michaela Antonio. You've been with us for 8 years as a special education teacher. You've been at Churchill Road all 8 years, and you've also worked ESY in the summer, notably at West Briar Elementary. So tell me first, what do you love about teaching special education? What brought you into the field, and what do you love about it?
I have to say, the thing I love most about special education is seeing the progress that each child makes, whether that's academic or behavior. It doesn't matter how big or small that progress is. I love seeing how the students are at the beginning of the year and being able to measure all that progress from the end of the year and make those celebrations with the general education teacher as well as the parents.
Michaela, I want to ask you a couple of questions too, some of the top questions that we're getting. You know, we know, and we've talked about already, that some of our special education students struggle with the online format. There's a lot to navigate. How do you, as a special education case manager and teacher, help support the kids, keep them organized, how they can connect with their peers? What are some of the successful strategies that you can share that will help students and their families see success this year?
That's a great question. So the first thing that I'm doing as a case manager is I'm working collaboratively with my general education teachers, and we're doing a lot of proactive planning, seeing if students are able to transition, if they might need frequent check-ins. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be communicating the schedule for our special education students to parents prior to that September 8th start date, just so they're aware of when their child is supposed to be in a virtual class. And especially that first month of school, we're going to be doing a lot more frequent check-ins. We have instructional assistants monitoring participation in general education classes, and we're going to be really building that partnership with our parents and having some frequent communication and touch bases with those parents. There are other things that we can be doing, such as providing parents with visuals and using visuals in our lessons, whether that be in our specialized instruction or in our general education classes, ensuring that parents are aware and the students are aware of the accommodations that the students can access throughout the day, making sure they're taking breaks, making sure that they are having their lessons accommodated, and we're just really going to build that partnership and have a really strong virtual start.
You know, Michaela, one of the things too, you talked about specialized instruction. How are you fitting that into a special education student's weekly schedule, daily schedule? How are you finding time to do those individual goals around the IEP?
Great. So what we have done is we've taken what our master schedule is, and there is a unencumbered specialized instruction time Tuesday through Friday where students are either accessing asynchronous work, but that's really where our special education students are going to be accessing either an evidence-based program or possibly working in a small group or one-on-one with their special education teacher or an IA. And that's where we're going to be really using those times to measure those goals, work on those goals, and teach the goals. The other thing is utilizing those Mondays for those specialized instruction times, and then as well, there are authentic times where we can actually pull students. So in elementary school, we do an explicit mini lesson in our core content classes, and then students are asked to do an activity or do small groups. And so that's an authentic time where even if we were in the building, we could pull them into a breakout room with either an IA or the special education teacher, and we can work on goals then or do some repeated lessons or reteaching.
You know, Michaela, one last question I want to ask. I know each school is sharing out the elementary school bell schedule, which is roughly the same, but has some individual differences. Can you just walk through what the typical student, particularly special education student, what their typical day will be like virtually as we start the year, from the beginning of the day through the middle part of the day? Talk a little bit about what kinds of instruction they'll see at what times, what kind of breaks, is there time for lunch? And just walk us through what a school day is going to look like for a special education student at your school.
Sure. So a student with an IEP at my school, they're going to participate in morning meeting with their general education class. That's a great time for them to connect with their class and their friends and make some really strong social connections. And then throughout that middle part of the day, that's where they're going to access some of the core content with their general education teacher. So either accessing the mini lesson and then going with the special education teacher to do the IEP work or to do a specialized program. And in each of the grade levels, there's going to be that specialized instruction block where some students might do asynchronous work, but a special education teacher would be working with, or a special education student would be working with their special education teacher or an instructional assistant. There's going to be at least 30 minutes for lunch. And then again in the afternoon, finishing up with whatever content is left. There's going to be at least 10 to 15-minute breaks in between throughout the day. And as well, we're going to be accommodating students. If they need a break, they're going to have breaks throughout the lessons. And then they're going to have family choice at the end where, you know, they are going to either connect with their special education teacher or they're going to work with some specialists and things like that.
Great, Michaela. Thank you. And thanks for all of your answers. I really appreciate everything you're doing. And let's take some calls. And caller, welcome to the Community Town Hall around special education.
Hello, Dr. Brabrand. My question this evening is, I have a son who's in the enhanced autism classroom and has not been able to successfully access any schooling virtually. He gets quite angry and honestly violent in front of a screen. He will throw a screen, kick a screen. And so as of March, when schools closed, he has not been able to access any school. And my question is, how long is this going to go forward, or what accommodations, what supports can he have? You know, I looked into SRS, but they don't have the ability to help my son to access a learning environment. He really needs somebody physically with him to access any of the schooling environment. So my question is, what accommodations can be made for students like him? And if not, what's going to be done to make up for the 30 hours a week of special education that he has not been able to access since March?
Well, I want to repeat, and I really appreciate, caller, you calling in. I am sorry that you're having and your child is having a frustrating experience. We are committed to creating in-person cohorts as soon as possible. That will be happening in the weeks just after we start our virtual start. And I'm committed to making sure that that is going to happen. I do want you to know that we are and we have budgeted additional dollars to work on supporting additional student needs. We provided schools with those additional supports that can be implemented virtually, but also can be implemented when we are doing small cohort in-person instruction. And so we can make sure that those resources, when those cohorts get up and running, are applied and supported for your child and for your family. And we remain committed to doing everything we can, as challenging as this pandemic is, to get it right for your child. I'm sorry that it's been a frustrating experience, and we will have those in-person cohorts set up as soon as practicable. So thank you, caller, for sharing. Caller, welcome to the Community Town Hall. We're glad to have you here. What's your question?
Yes, thank you so much for taking my call. And my question is more adapted to the high school environment, not the elementary. And I have been listening very intently and taking notes, so I completely understand everything. But in the high school environment, and I took notes from the other caller, you know, they're going to have a participant meeting in the morning. They're going to have core contact and go to lunch, and then you know, breaks throughout their lesson. I didn't understand that last part, and that's fine. But my question is, how do you anticipate getting a special needs child to stay involved through all this on a virtual learning system, and then they know how to log into games? I mean, what does that entail for a high school special needs? Because they got hormones, they got everything else going on. So, like, that involvement, how do you think that's going to, play that out for me?
Sure, thank you. And let me let you, Mike, start with what the high school schedule looks like. And I think the caller is also asking, as we share this high school schedule, which is going to be following our traditional bell schedule, as I understand it, what are things that we can do to provide supports for special education kids that may find that switch virtually from class to class distracting or disrupting for their educational needs?
Well, thank you, caller, for that question. That's a good question. Our secondary students are either accessing the general curriculum, where a majority of their day is spent in the general education setting, or our adapted curriculum, where a majority of their time might be spent in a self-contained setting with the supports of a special education teacher and instructional assistants. So the goal is ultimately to keep kids engaged to the extent that they can and to the extent that it's appropriate, either in that general ed setting or that special education setting. We were very intentional about building into time during the student's schedule for breaks, for looking at a model that provides an opportunity for some of that time for individualized or specialized instruction. So as students engage in the general education setting, we want to make sure that they're engaged and supported, again, by that special educator that might be co-teaching or entering that space with that general ed teacher. And for that self-contained setting, that teacher is, again, going to be looking at each individual schedule of students and be able to, again, by name and by need, determine when they need a break, when they need to access time away from that screen, when they might need some level of reteaching, when that teacher needs to refocus the attention of those students. So there will be opportunities that are just naturally built into our schedules for our secondary students for flexibility in how we get kids to engage and to access that virtual instruction.
You know, one of the things too, Mike, I know that we're talking about at high school, the opportunity, even in high school, as complicated as it is in the world of the pandemic because of all the mixing that we do at high schools. But we're also looking at high schools at that Monday model of intervention where we may be able to bring back some select cohorts of kids with special needs and offer supports or interventions on Mondays. I don't know whether we've fulfilled or filled out yet all of our plans around that, but I think Mondays can be really a place that help us look at how we can meet the needs of some of our students at that high school level, as at least the beginning step.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we've allowed some flexibility in that Monday intervention schedule. Again, in the virtual environment, there might be an opportunity for some of that specialized instruction or a specific goal that a student is working on that's part of their IEP. So they can engage Monday virtually with their teacher. But also, as we look at that phase-in plan, there may be opportunities for students to come in, again, to receive some specialized instruction around a specific IEP goal, a related service. But again, I keep going back to that word flexibility. We need to have flexibility and we need to be able to problem solve, again, the individual needs that our students have.
Thank you, Mike. Let's take another phone call. Caller, welcome to the Community Town Hall around special education.
Hello.
Hello, welcome, caller.
Hi. So I have a question about the regional decision making. You mentioned several times that your all virtual decision was a regional decision based on regional health conditions. But the superintendents in Prince William County, Loudoun County, Stafford County, Manassas City, and Fauquier County are all returning their special education students in person as an exception to their all virtual policies. I'm curious how they managed it. Maybe you should ask them for some tips. They probably have some good advice for you.
Well, I appreciate that feedback. We are working very closely with our regional partners. As you know, each of our school districts have faced the pandemic and worked to make decisions in the best interest of students and staff. We've worked very collaboratively, and actually I know, Mike, you've sent out a team and we worked with our Loudoun colleagues, and we're using much of their ideas and our own ideas to inform our return to school phase-in plan for the cohorts. I recognize that everybody looks at each school district to make their own decisions. Several school districts around the region are staying virtual, not just for the first quarter, but actually for the first semester. Other districts are beginning to have a virtual start or are having a virtual start. In fact, all of our schools in the region are having a virtual start in the DC metropolitan area, and some are doing a phase-in. And we are one of the school districts that is planning that phase-in, and we will be sharing an update with dates very soon to have many of our most vulnerable kids back in the classroom. So I appreciate the feedback, and we'll continue to collaborate with our local and regional partners to do the very best we can. Let's take an email. One of the questions is, my son is a rising FCPS kindergartner and special ed student, and as an FCPS secondary teacher, I want to do the best for my students while also helping my son access online learning and give him additional supports. But the conflicting schedules make this a real challenge. If we begin allowing cohorts of kids to return to school, will you be able to allow and honor the commitment that we had talked about a couple of months ago for Fairfax County teachers' children to attend 4 days a week, especially if our children are part of these special cohorts? You know, that's a great question. That's something we need to take a real look at. We were certainly working around child care for our FCPS teachers who have students in schools, and I will take that back to our team and provide an update in the weeks ahead. It's an excellent question. We want to do everything we can to support our teachers to be successful. We have many of our teachers actually returning to their classrooms, asking their principals if they can come back so that they can be in their lab if they're a science teacher, or access to specialized technology, or they're more comfortable being back in the classroom environment to deliver the instruction virtually. So we'll continue to see what we can do to support teacher child care as we phase in additional cohorts this fall. I'll take another email. What do you anticipate the timeline being for STEP students to return in person and have the opportunity to participate in job site placements? I really appreciate FCPS prioritizing safety while providing support for students with the greatest needs. But what about the STEP program? Mike, can you talk a little bit about the STEP program, what it is for those that may not know, and what are we doing to try to work with that job placement piece, as I know businesses are facing some of their challenges too with the pandemic?
Sure. So thank you for that question. So our STEP program is designed to give students who are ready to move away from FCPS and into the workforce an opportunity to gain some job experience with many of our community employers. And this provides an opportunity for them to practice and demonstrate a number of the skills that they've been working on through their FCPS learning in the classroom to be able to be successful in a job and in a career after they leave FCPS. I've been working very closely in our team with the administrators from our Davis and Pulley Career Centers and our STEP program, and they've been reaching out to a number of our employers that we work with in Fairfax County, and most of our employers right now are not allowing our FCPS students to go back into the workplace, but we're continually week by week monitoring with our employers the ability to have our students access on-the-job training and on-the-job opportunities. But what our administrators are doing, they're working with their teachers so that in the virtual environment, again, they're not able to go into the work environment now, we're creating lessons and opportunities to engage those students in activities around workplace readiness skills, around skills that they would need to be successful in the work environment. So many of our administrators are looking at creating modules and rotating students through those modules to provide some of those supports that they'll need in order to be successful in the workplace. So we're going to continue to monitor that and work with our Fairfax County employers, and as soon as practicable, if we can bring those students back and get them back in the workplace, that's our goal.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate that. Glad to hear that we're going to continue to work with those businesses and do everything we can to create those opportunities for students to go back and have those great career experiences. Michaela, Ed, I want to ask, actually, Michaela and Ed, I didn't want to put both of those names together. I want to ask you just a question that I think is a theme tonight for some of our callers, especially as we look at special education students. The spring was frustrating for many families of special education parents. It was frustrating for many of their students. What's the best message you can share with them today as we prepare for the fall? How is it going to be different in the fall, and what can they do to sort of take that second chance to embrace what we're going to provide to students this fall? Michaela, you want to go first, and then Ed?
Sure. So what I can say at my school is we have been planning since we've been back on contract to really have a robust virtual start for all students, but especially for our students with special education services. We're making sure that they are accessing their core curriculum as well as accessing their specialized programs. And it's an all hands on deck approach. We have our counselors, our school psychologists, our social worker working with us, as well as utilizing our resources from central office. And we're really going to build that strong partnership with the school and with our parents. And it's going to look very different from what distance learning in the spring looked like.
And you know, Michaela, you talked about all hands on deck. I think it's important to share tonight. All of us here in Fairfax County Public Schools want this to be a successful school year. We want to partner with you. We know the spring was a challenge for many families, and we are committed to doing our very best to overcome those challenges as we start this fall and to do everything we can to return to small cohorted in-person learning as safely and as quickly as we can. So, Michaela, I really appreciate you sharing that. Ed, what would be some of the things that you would share with families? What would be your message this evening?
I would say that we were all frustrated in the springtime. You know, none of us expected this. None of us wanted this. And it just happened. So we kind of started out and then we had to stop, and we started out and had to stop. There were technology challenges. There were challenges trying to get children to engage. There were challenges for us trying to accomplish the goals that we had in place, which were really twofold: to continue the relationships that we had already established with our students, but also to test the waters and what synchronous learning would look like. I can speak for my team at Rosehill. We decided to kind of go all in right in the springtime. So we started synchronous sessions, we started asynchronous sessions, and we also had one-on-one coaching times with families. It helped us develop ourselves in ways that we could be more successful coming into this fall. Plus, the training that we've gotten this summer has really helped get us primed for a virtual environment. So I think it's going to be good. I'm excited. I've got a lot of ideas how we can make the learning environment a lot more engaging and fun. I think it should be fun at all levels, not just in preschool. I think even a high school student, if they're engaged and they're having a good time, they're going to be more apt to log in. They're going to be more apt to learn from their teacher. So.
Well, that's great. You know, Ed and Michaela, you're really talking about relationship building with kids. And we've given our teachers, I'm glad you talked about the additional planning time, and we're really grateful to have this additional time to work with you and provide professional development to teachers around those strategies that can really help engage students in a virtual environment. And you both talked about that. You're both excited. We're all excited, and we know we want to build on that excitement with a great virtual start and then continue to build on it throughout the whole school year. I think we're going to take another phone call. Caller, welcome to the Community Town Hall around special education.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand, and thank you for hosting this forum. It's been very helpful. I am curious about community service programs that could potentially be made available, any partnerships that are out there. I'm a single working parent of a high school student who requires a higher level of supervision than I am comfortable with in leaving him home unattended. Are there any programs or partnerships that have been established between FCPS and, say, community centers, Merrifield centers, churches, other partnerships where we could have drop-offs for a student who can take their school-issued laptop maybe to the library, still have access to the internet to get to their daily instruction, but that the student who has an IEP needs that extra level of supervision so that I can go back to work?
You know, thank you, Carla. That's a great question. That's something I will take back to my team and look at. I know as the pandemic occurred in the spring, we were working with community partners, and we will reach out about those opportunities. I know what we have shared already, our SRS is focused on our elementary, and you're really talking about opportunities for middle and high school students that really have those special needs and want to have some assistance. I will absolutely go back and talk to our folks about reaching out to community partners and get the update. We are working diligently with our community. The Ed Foundation, our Fairfax County Education Foundation, has been working with our community around getting materials to kids. We've been working very hard around getting our meal distribution lined up for kids. And this additional idea of support for students with drop-off sites is something I will take back and share with our team. So thank you so much. Thank all of you for being here this evening for this community town hall around special education. I want to thank Mike again, Michaela, Ed. Fairfax County Public Schools has the most amazing staff in the country when it comes to delivering high-quality public education. We know the challenges that all of you are facing. And we know that we are here to support you and to give you the resources and supports that we can, and to begin to work to identify, as we are, those small cohorts that we can have to have in-person cohort learning for our most vulnerable kids. We are dedicated around the notion of every child by name and by need, and we are excited to serve you and your children this year. It will be a year unlike any other in Fairfax County Public Schools, but I'm confident that we will continue to communicate with you, to partner with you, to take your feedback about what we're doing well, and as you have tonight, given us additional food for thought about how we can do better. But we are here, we are present, we are listening, and we will continue to build on a legacy of excellence and supporting your children in having a successful school year. Thank you again, Michaela and Ed and Mike, and for all of us here in Fairfax County Public Schools. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and come next week, our town hall on Wednesday night will be around parent and technology support. So we hope you'll come out and learn more about that. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next week.